With that as one topic, let's bring in our panel. On the left, Ellis Henican, TV and radio commentator, joining us from Newsmax, New York, and from our Washington bureau, Ford O'Connell, chairman of the Civic Forum PAC. Ford, we'll start with you. The author of this article in Politico argues that basically not only the fact that Governor Bush is moderate, but that his last name is Bush might be complicating factors. Do you agree?
Well, let's be honest, if his last name were not Bush, and that's a very big if, he would actually be leading the Republican field right now by more than he does. And that's really the bottom line. But here's the deal. If you want to win the 2016 Republican nomination, you can support Common Core or immigration, but if you support both, you are seriously taking your life in your hands. But to be perfectly honest, no one knows Governor Bush's record. Here's a guy who basically cut taxes by $14 billion in Florida, line item vetoed hundreds of in-state pork projects, is pro-life, pro-gun. What more can you actually ask for if you set aside Common Core and immigration? Here's somebody who has conservative bona fides in the most important political state. It's kind of unfortunate right now that talk radio, Laura Ingraham, Mark Levin, and Rush Limbaugh have basically cast Jeb Bush aside.
Well, even to take personalities out of it, some other conservatives, maybe like one sitting right here, has some problems because the Republican Party is the Republican Party. It's not the Regency Party. One family doesn't dominate. But let me step aside and let Ellis take a shot. What do you think of a possible Jeb Bush candidacy?
Well, listen, all the folks Ford just mentioned have a huge amount of influence over the Republican primary system. I think it may very well be true, and Jeb is talking about this himself, that having some reasonable positions on those issues is darn near disqualifying if you're trying to run in Iowa or South Carolina. You know, good luck getting through some of those whack jobs there to get to the nomination to ever get a chance to win.
Common sense, conservative.
Well, imagine that, JD. I always love it when Democrats tell me how we run our own system. Let's be honest, though, Ellis does make a good point, and that is basically talk radio is the internet for the Republican Party. It is our lifeblood. It is where our base party sits. I think Jeb Bush's bigger problem is that basically he antagonizes conservatives. He doesn't have to pander to them, but he has to understand that they are a very key factor, and I think that's a very big problem for him.
Well, I tell you what, let's do.
Campaigning has changed a ton since he last was on the top of the ticket, and he has to understand the importance of talk radio in the Republican base.
Let's do this. Let's listen to what Jeb himself has to say about presidential ambitions, and we'll give you a reaction.
Every person that runs for office at any level, it's a big sacrifice because it's a pretty ugly business right now. So I'm not saying, oh, woe is me here, and don't get me wrong, but there's a level under which I would never subjugate my family because that's my organizing principle. That's my life.
I don't want to subject your family to that kind of stress and strain. Well, it's been all in the family for the Bushes. Let's face it. In the final analysis for it, is it an advantage for Jeb?
Well, the fact that it's all in the family, it's an advantage if he wants to raise money like a holy roller on Sunday morning to be president. But it really, let's be honest, if his name were not Bush and he had his wife's maiden name of Gaio, let me be honest with you, we'd be lauding this guy and telling him that he should be our nominee. That's the problem. He is a Bush. You don't like family dynasties, and I agree with you. The problem is it's like Peyton Manning. Eli Manning had his father and his sons are great quarterbacks solely because it's a family business. This is a learned skill, and a lot of people don't understand what it takes to win the Republican nomination or the Democratic nomination.
Fair
for
enough.
That matter.
Tell you what, let's let Ellis 20 seconds here on this.
Yeah, you know, but I mean, Ford is right. There's a real problem here, guys, right? If you have a party where to get the nomination, you have to bend over backwards to the most extreme elements in the party, it's not a very good way to begin a broad-based general election that has to attract folks in the middle.
Okay.
And you guys, for some reason, you're in this box right now. I don't know how you get out of it.
Well, time is upon us. Gentlemen, stay with us. We'll be right back after. We'll continue that conversation from Newsmax, New York, with TV and radio commentator Ellis Henican, and from Washington in our Newsmax bureau there, Republican strategist Ford O'Connell, the chairman of the Civic Forum PAC. So, Ford, this is just reaffirmation that ambassadorships go to the highest bidder, is it not?
Well, it certainly is. They obviously don't pay Josh Earnest enough to lie that unconvincingly. And the bottom line is, yes, this is how this game is played. Look, the sad part is and I agree with my former boss, John McCain, we expect the government to put up serious and legitimate ambassadors. She's not qualified, not even close, and we have a real problem with Hungary because basically Prime Minister Viktor Orban is trying to get in bed with the Russians over a gas pipeline deal and a nuclear deal, considering that Hungary is a member of NATO and the EU. This is a real problem and really puts America's and its allies' national security at risk.
On one hand, Ellis, the whole notion of ambassadorships for sale is nothing new. Presidents of both parties have been doing it for a long time. What about Ford's point about the serious situation involving Hungary needing someone who's a professional diplomat there in that job?
Well, let's see if we can get a broader principle here. Hungary is kind of important. It's not Russia. I mean, it's not the most important thing in the world. But let's agree on this. These things have gone way back, right? I mean, I'm thinking of Shirley Temple Black. I mean, I guess maybe that's a good parallel here, right? I want to start singing the Good Ship Lollipop in a minute. But maybe
then
we
put her in the Bahamas, Ellis.
I
mean, she's a producer for The Bold and the Beautiful.
No,
Unless she's a CIA
basically
spy who's going to make propaganda films that's going to break Russia and Hungary apart. That's great.
Let's
be
hang on. Time.
How come,
Ellis, make your point.
How come none of Right. Ford, I don't remember any of Ford's friends being too upset when Shirley Temple was sent to Czechoslovakia, to Ghana. I mean, those are important places as well. But why don't we make a universal agreement here? Why don't we say that we ought to get rid of the donors, we ought to get rid of the movie people, and we ought to send professional State Department experienced ambassadors to every single one of these countries and quit making it a political plum. Pull Caroline Kennedy out of Ireland, pull all of it out, and let this be a job for professionals. I would be completely cool with that.
What about that,
Unfortunately,
Ford?
I have to agree with Ellis. For once, he actually sounds rational, and that's absolutely right. You're going to need experienced State Department people because the world is getting more dangerous, and the bottom line is the U.S. cannot have a foothold everywhere, so we actually need people on the ground to know what they're doing.
A minute and a half remains. Yeah. Let's move from ambassadorships to a different type of delicate dance between the White House and Congress. That is a possible government shutdown. Listen to what Rand Paul had to say. Oh, now that's okay. We'll get your take on it. Senator Paul is uncharacteristically silent because of technical difficulties. Ford, we just came through a landslide victory for Republicans last month. Why are Boehner and the guys so terrified of a government shutdown still?
Because every time we do it, we get hurt. We just spent a year repairing our image. Now the GOP brand is ahead of the Democrats. Let's not hurt that goodwill. Let's not piss that away. The bottom line is the cavalry's coming basically in 4 weeks. And Boehner should have made this point to his caucus, and that is, this hurts the working class, the very people that are fleeing the Democratic Party, and we need to help them because at the end of the day, shutdowns cause a constitutional crisis, and we got to be above that.
All right, 20 seconds to Ellis on a possible shutdown.
Well, boy, I hope some of those Tea Party fire breathers are listening to Ford. It would obviously be way better for America if this new class of Republicans decides to actually govern. How about that possibility? Why don't you try that? Maybe your poll numbers will go up. How about that? That would be great. Bring it on.
Yeah, the problem is this lame duck session before the new Congress comes into session, and it's the whole element of time. Speaking of time, gentlemen, our time is up. Ellis Henican in New York, Ford O'Connell in D.C., thanks very much.